Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Pac-12 Chat Show Live here on the Voice of College Football channel. I'm Tony Altimore, as always, here with Tim, Rick, and Chris, and we're excited to talk about Week 0. Guys, do we remember the fact that there is football this week? How exciting is that?
Thank God.
Yeah, now all this realignment, all the other stuff can get shoved away, and we got to talk football for once.
I like it. We have two. Sorry, go ahead, Rick.
I was going to say it's fantastic. I can't wait to talk about football. Even if you're not going to the USC game, you won't be able to watch it, but we can talk about it. And we'll get into that a little bit later.
Sounds good. All right, guys. We got a couple pieces of news to dive into. It has been quite a week going on. And let's hit a couple pieces of news. First of all, around the conference. First of all, for those of you guys who may have seen, Reggie Bush announced plans today, or announced the details today of a lawsuit filed in Indiana against the NCAA for defamation related to false accusations they made about pay for play. And quite an interesting press conference today at the LA Coliseum. Guys, what did you think about today's comments?
Tim, why don't you go first? You've been pounding the drum for the past 6 months.
Well, actually, it's been, for the past 25 weeks, I've been telling these guys to get out in front of the story. I wish I didn't update this. It's actually 4,725 days since they took this man's trophy away from him in the kangaroo court. Based on, and I was glad to hear the attorneys talk about it, on even if their allegations that they never really proved are correct, it's illegal. It's illegal to keep someone from earning money for their name, image, and likeness, and it's now proven. So if it's illegal now, it was obviously illegal then. You can't have rules based on something's illegal, and now Reggie and his attorneys are coming after it. Reggie basically said, I've got dreams of coming back in the stadium and running out of the tunnel with my football team. I've got a dream of walking back in here and seeing my jersey and my banner right down there next to the rest of the Heisman Trophy winners. And he pointed down to, they showed this thing at the Coliseum. He points down to all the other guys that have their names up there. And he said, but I can't rightfully do that without my Heisman Trophy. And he could have come back anytime. The disassociation ended a while back, and he could have gone, but he's waiting for his good name to be reinstated. And,
sorry, go ahead, Tim.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I thought it was interesting just to point out to folks here. So USC had used for the past, almost 40 years, guys, we had hung jerseys in the peristyle, which is the arched end of the Coliseum. And this year they were replaced with banners, brand new this year. And there is a noticeable hole where they are missing number 5. And then, of course, the brand new number 13 for Caleb Williams, which we hope will be unveiled this year. So I thought it was really interesting that USC has reconfigured the Coliseum to show that hole in the stadium.
Yeah, and there is a nice little pattern there, right? You see there's a spot for the 2 jerseys that should be there to be fitted in. And they just did a good job, and I haven't had a chance to look through all of it yet, but his lawyers released a document showing all of the flaws and issues they had with it, things that I've talked about. I'm sure Rick has talked about for the better part of a decade now, and just how shoddy the actual findings were.
The investigation was
the entire investigation and the findings just came out were ridiculous, and they're all kind of just hinged on the fact that Lloyd Lake and his testimony, the main witness, and they said, quote, this was an appellate court talking about it. It was said that it was unclear, unreliable, speculative, vague, and so unresponsive that they would have been stricken from the record if it made it to court. And just what they based their whole thing on.
For folks that are not as versed in USC lore, one of the things Tim's referring to is Coach McNair, who was the USC assistant coach, sued the NCAA and won an $8 million settlement for the NCAA's false accusations against him related to how shoddy their investigation was. And so what this lawsuit is, this is actually not about the original investigation. This lawsuit filed today is a claim of defamation from 2021 comments by the NCAA, where they came out and said Reggie Bush was part of a pay-for-play scandal, which was not true. No, nothing had to do with USC in this. And so that's where this defamation case comes from here.
And the shame is that many people in the media knew exactly what was going on, yet they also continued the story that when it's very clear, and then the things will come out. The fact that the money that was received, any money that was received, alleged to be received, they're saying, right, they're very clear in their statement. They're saying none of it had to do with pay for play. And they keep banging the drum of the part also the fact that that money received for name, image, and likeness, again, it's illegal to keep it. It's illegal to keep it from student athletes. So I see where they're going to go with this, and I'm hoping that the best part about this situation is going to be is the truth's going to come out, because for too long we've heard too many fans, be it here in the Pac-12 or the rest of the country, wanted to make this more than it was and wanted to take USC down. And the fact of the matter is that it wasn't a USC booster. It wasn't anybody that really had any love for USC, and it wasn't to get USC to go to USC, Reggie Bush to go to USC or stay at USC, right? It was these guys that want to be agents that wanted Reggie to leave USC. And so I'm hoping that the truth comes out, and that once they reinstate his stats, it's going to be a trickle effect, and it's going to have to be that USC also will get their BCS title back, as well as their 14 vacated games. Rick, I know you're chomping a bit. Why don't you go ahead and finish it up?
Yeah, no. The last 3 days have told me a lot, and I've had conversations offline with Tony. I have never seen USC acting like USC in the past 30 years. Everything was orchestrated that happened on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And Carol Fold is acting like Cersei Lannister, and I posted it on Twitter. She is a baller. We're starting to see that.
She is.
Okay, she's chairman, I think, Tony, of the AAU. This was just another.
She is chairman of the AAU, yeah.
This was planned. Let's not fool anybody. Reggie Bush had the press conference outside of his attorney's office. The fact that it was up in Club 22 in the roof of the Coliseum tells me everything I need to know. That this was a message sent to the NCAA and the SEC and ESPN, who enabled and basically filled the SEC's coffers back in 2008. Okay, and it's made their basketball programs and their baseball programs. And enough is enough. That is what's happened. So on Monday morning, when the students went back to school for the 2023 school year, USC acts big time and gets the #1 athletic director out of the transfer portal in Jen Cohen from the University of Washington. So they kneecap a 50%, I think, Tim, as you call them, the half price Huskies. They kneecapped them going to the Big Ten, and they took the AD. Then on Tuesday, Lincoln Riley says, "Oh, Dr. Fold, I still got my juju." He gets the #1 player in the 2026 class, the #1 quarterback out of Georgia. Hello, Dylan Raiola. Juju Lewis. And there's speculation even before this happened that he was going to possibly reclassify to the class of 2025. And then on Tuesday night, it comes out on ESPN about 9 p.m. Pacific that Reggie Bush was going to file a defamation lawsuit against the NCAA. And they had the press conference today at 11 o'clock. And you know it's a big-time press conference when Jim Hill is there from CBS Sports. It's big time. And so, as Tim, you went into it, I watched the live press conference, as I believe Tony did, and a lot of other Trojans. The one thing that wasn't brought up was
did we lose Rick?
No, I just be right back.
That Todd McNair, the NCAA settled with Todd McNair after a decade, because that's who the NCAA, in this wrongful investigation of Reggie Bush and USC, they pinned it on Todd McNair. They didn't have any emails that connected Pete Carroll nor Reggie Bush. So they fabricated a case against Todd McNair. And Todd McNair said, and he fought for a decade. And he won $8 million. So when the NCAA pays $8 million, that pretty much tells you, yes, they didn't have a case. And it came out today in the press conference that Reggie Bush said, go ahead and look at the filing that's online. They never, it wasn't disclosed or it wasn't proven, it wasn't brought up that his parents received a house. It wasn't in the investigation.
Yeah.
So
and
the reason why a lot of people don't know about that is because that same day, 45 minutes later, Texas and Oklahoma announced that they were leaving for the SEC. Okay, and this was approximately 3.5 weeks after NIL became legal on July 1st.
Oh, we just lost LBC again. And by the way, thank you to Gixxer Squid for posting that in the chat. We really appreciate that. He actually put the link to the study for anybody who wants to read.
And really, what Rick was talking about until he comes back. If you guys aren't checking out Fight on Rusty, he did exactly that. He said he laid it out. He's been doing it actually. It's kind of weird. It's almost like he was like a Nostradamus of some sort. Because on Monday he stated, Monday they hired Jen Cohen. On Tuesday they talked about Julian becoming, the number one quarterback, the number one player overall for the class of 26 that may reclassify 25. Announces that he's going to be a Trojan, and they had question marks for today, and then for Thursday, and then for Friday, and then the game on Saturday, and he's been filling him in each day. And the one thing I love about I'll stop gushing in a minute because I know it's a Pac-12 show, but ever since they hired Carol Folt, and you've heard Jen Cohen a little soundbite. She says one of the reasons why she took this job is the fact that she knows that Carol Folt's 100% behind the athletics department. And she said, and that's been evident. And if you're a Trojan fan, you've seen that with every step they've done. It's been everything's just been in alignment, and it's been going, and it's just been one thing after another. And it just seems like there's a big overall arching plan, and that should be scary for other programs because USC was winning Rose Bowls when it was in shambles. So it was nice to see that part. We got Rick back.
Must be nice to have a president or a chancellor that is fully on board instead of red tape bureaucracy that likes to get in the way half the time. But I have a quick before Rick jumps back in and finishes,
and then we can move on to Jen Cohen. Go ahead.
Yeah, and that was one of my questions was, do we have a different slide for Jen Cohen? Because we can talk about that. But my second question, and Tim, maybe is I don't want to get into the legal merits of whether Reggie Bush has a defamation claim as a public figure and how all of that works. But I do have somewhat procedural question is, the NCAA itself, right, is separate from the Heisman Committee. So in terms of him actually getting his Heisman back, it's like a separate decision, right?
Well, the issue is they're hiding behind that. So I guess it's a bylaw or some rule. I can
answer that.
Well, let me answer real quick, Tony. I got it.
I actually know the answer though.
So do I. But go ahead if you want to.
Yeah. So the real issue from the Heisman Trust, what they have repeatedly said is that when the decision came out, they declared Reggie Bush to not have been eligible during that Heisman season. And so the procedural gimmick that the Heisman Trust used, because the Heisman Trust did not want to get into itself making decisions, and they didn't want to have to, re-legislate Cam Newton, whatever, Johnny Manziel now, whatever kind of scandals went on. So the procedural machination that the Heisman Trust has used is to say that because he was not an eligible player, he's not eligible for the Heisman. So should he be redeclared an eligible player, then they would reissue the Heisman. That's the procedural machination that they used at the time and that they have stood by since. And there continues to be a lot of misunderstanding about that. But it's that the eligibility is the piece that the Heisman Trust has used.
And if you're not eligible, then all of your that's okay. Well, and they talked about it in the statement today, the reinstatement of his statistics. And so that's another thing they talk about is that they strip you of all of your numbers and everything. And that also is part of what the Heisman Trust is hid behind. But I don't, to answer your question, I don't think they're trying to win this case. I don't think Reggie Bush needs some, $8 million, right? I mean, anyone could take that money, but I'm saying, I think this is like, you could tell me you might know a little more about law than I do. It's the discovery and getting all this stuff out there into the public and in the public domain, all this clandestine stuff that was happening during these, during the investigation and all this internal stuff. It's all that discovery is going to come from that, Chris. Could that cause a problem for the NCAA?
I'm sure it could. And I imagine that they don't want to draw out more litigation and pay a ton of money. And they're obviously not as powerful as an institution as they used to be. So I would think that it's more so like a power leverage play of, do these other, like settling for other things out of court and squashing this. In an ideal world, I don't think either party really wants to litigate, but the threat of the litigation itself is, I'm sure, I mean, I'm not a litigator. I work in contracts and whatnot, but I would imagine that the threat of litigation and the idea of trying to avoid that altogether on both sides is sort of what everyone wants, but with the caveat that obviously Reggie and USC would like that settlement to include reinstatement of all his past records, et cetera, et cetera.
And let's face it, the last thing that the NCAA wants at this point,
yep,
is
and then let's move on.
More ineffective, and the fact that and make them look bad, bad press for the NCAA. They've had a lot of it, and so for those reasons, I don't think they're trying to win a defamation case. I agree. I've heard a lot of people talk about that, winning as a public figure, winning a defamation case. However, I think it's just, like you said, a power play in order to move this thing along.
Cool. All right. So moving on, another piece of news.
Wait, Rick, you're on mute. Rick was saying something.
Can I get one last word in? I think the NCAA came off my feed earlier. Big brother NCAA was watching.
They were.
Yeah, and it's hard to win a defamation case. And trust me, I don't believe Reggie Bush even thinks this is going to go to trial. And you guys touched upon it. It's a public relations nightmare right now for the NCAA. I mean, when you have Johnny Manziel's story coming out along with Urban Meyer the same month on Netflix, okay, it was just reported a few minutes ago that Mason Smith, the defensive lineman from LSU who tore his ACL in the first game against Florida State, he's not going to be playing the first game because he took improper benefits. How do you take improper benefits in the state of NIL? So I think what's going to happen with this is USC and Reggie Bush have a better chance of winning this, not even going to court, because you have a different president in Charlie Baker. You don't have Mark Emmert. Mark Emmert would die on the hill for this case. So you have different leadership. And right now at USC, you have different leadership. And again, at that press conference to introduce the AD, look at what USC did. They basically showed the nation and the NCAA, we are fully aligned from the board of trustees with Sarah Norris Johnson down, through the president to the athletic liaison, to the athletic director, to the head coach. USC is prepared to basically win at everything, and they will.
All right.
Really quick, Clint Moses, really quick. The banners you see there, that the peristyle end, first off, that is really far away from the field, if you've ever seen the Coliseum. Also, there's a sun deck between them. So nobody for years and years and years have sat. And those are concrete. Those aren't seats. Those are concrete steps. So now the banners on the sides, that might be a little UCLA-ish, but those are also pretty bad sight lines and pretty far away from a stadium. The way the Coliseum's built, it's not like a bowl where it's in the center. It really is a weird shape. So you got to decide which side of the stadium you want to move the field. And this side, there's a lot of room between the field and the seats.
All right, let's move on. Let's talk about Jen Cohen. So big news, actually. The athletic director from Washington, Jennifer Cohen, has left Washington for USC. We did a whole kind of a breaking news show on this, so I don't want to rehash the news. But guys, what does this mean for USC and what does this mean for Washington going forward?
Do you want me to get my jokes out of the way and then I'll give one serious comment and then you guys can talk about what you actually
I know you've been holding them, so let them go. Let them fly.
All right. The first thing is that I hope that this works out as well for USC as its last major hire from the University of Washington. And then
But
I also hope that her next hires go as well as Jimmy Lake and the basketball hire they have. That's actually like Mike Hopkins is actually like a really interesting thing. I have to imagine there's some budget restraints for them in terms of actually getting rid of him, because it doesn't make sense that he is still coaching that basketball program, which is a basketball program that's, you know, not necessarily UCLA level or whatnot, but is like a proud basketball program that has had good teams and wants to be better than what they're doing right now, and doesn't really have an excuse for being as bad as it is right now. I have to imagine there's money issues there that are keeping it from happening. So like, jokes aside, the Kalen DeBoer hire is obviously a great hire. And again, how much of Jimmy Lake was her decision versus Chris Peterson saying what needs to happen and everybody else telling her what needs to happen versus her own hire, and then how much of Kalen DeBoer was her own hire. You know, we'll never know, and I'm not going to pretend to know enough about the inner workings of every athletic department and who's who. People generally seem to like her, and so, you know, jokes aside, I think it's probably a pretty good hire. But I guess we'll see.
Yeah, and who knows? I mean, I don't know, but she wasn't the AD, but she was there in the athletic department when they did hire Chris Peterson. She was part of a department that was able to lure him away from Boise State. And I agree with you. I think I saw Rick nod and says, well, that Chris Peterson, although he was stepping down, remained a big part of the department. And I'm sure his say on the situation was big. But, you know, the DeBoer hire is good. We'll see. I mean, we gotta be careful though, because the DeBoer hire, you know, he had a great 1 year. Let's let this thing play out before we get excited. You know, everyone was excited at Oregon, you know, after Chip Kelly stepped down, but you know, that fizzled out quick too. So it'll be interesting to see if they go. I like the fact that she seems like she gets LA. She's from LA. She's big market. She's big thinking. You know, she came across the way she did, but you could tell the way she runs it. She ran a huge department up in Washington. It's not a small budget up there. So, you know, she can get things done. And the fact that we do need to raise a bunch of money. I know we have the Fox money, but there's a lot of capital investment that USC is going to put into its athletics department, as far as that football only facility and then new additions to McAllister Field to make it more of a stadium. I think those things are going to play huge. And I do think she's supposed to do it. And the biggest stamp is the stamp that Lincoln Riley, hours later, after she got hired, came out. She was all for it. He says he's known of her. You know, it's this probably small community in athletics. But that was the stamp I want to get. I want to make sure, because you don't go out and get a guy like Lincoln Riley and then hire an AD that's going to handicap him. I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
Well, real quick, Tim, Lincoln Riley actually was more involved in the hiring process, I think, than he has let on, because he also made a number of comments about other candidates who claimed to be candidates but weren't.
And that was a shot to the FSU guy, Tony? Was that a shot towards the FSU guy that made his comment?
That would seem to be. I would defer to anyone else to decide who they think he was taking a shot at, but it certainly made me laugh. When Lincoln Riley said, yeah, a lot of people who withdrew from the process, what did he say? Somehow magically inserted themselves into a process they weren't in.
And weren't really in consideration, I think is how he kind of put it.
Yeah, they weren't even up for consideration. So that was kind of funny. Made me laugh. Yeah. One thing I thought, Tim, just building on your comment really quick about what you said about how she was involved with Chris Peterson. One of the things I thought was really impressive, before she was the AD, and she was really, I think she was running fundraising for the university at the time. She is known as such a good like developer of people and judge of people, that Chris Peterson would bring her in to sit in on assistant coach interviews and treated, even though she wasn't the AD, she was in fundraising, and treated her opinion and her verdict on whether this was the right person to hire or not above anyone else's. So she's really known as like elite people developer.
And he's a big character guy himself, so that does speak a lot. Yeah, absolutely.
Serge, I'm a little disappointed you didn't continue your joke. You know, Christmas time when you do the white elephant gift, and you know, you open up a gift and then somebody can steal it, and then you can steal it until it's over. You didn't bring up that Texas took a fired Sark from USC and hired him. So I don't know if that's a lateral move, an upward move, but Texas, when he got hired, was still in the Big 12. So, we got to you got to finish up that joke because you stopped it at USC and you didn't continue it to Texas. That's all I got.
When Jen gets hired by Texas, then we'll come back to that.
Okay, but wait a bit. She'll have to get hired.
And I hope it goes.
Hey, man.
I hope it
Hey,
goes.
hey,
I hope it goes in similar fashion for the same, and with similar success.
Okay, but she'll have to get hired by Saban in between because she need to be car washed by Saban before she can get over there.
Yeah, she can be an assistant athletic director at Alabama and get rehabilitated and then go to Texas.
I know. Go ahead, Big 12 OU fans and Texas fans. Tell me right now that Sark, took the job because they were going to the SEC, and Lincoln Riley left because he was running from the SEC. I'll go ahead and call that right now. But good luck down there on the 40 acres with 7-win Sark.
Well, they did win 49-0. That's all I'm going to say there as well. So
they did
going downhill.
Who beat Texas and who beat Texas in the Alamo Bowl? Washington.
All right. So we move on. The other big news today, and this is really possibly the biggest news today across the conference. So as the Pac-12 conference has faced meltdown over the past few days, we had some big news today come out from Pete Thamel and Ross Dellinger reporting that the ACC may now be on the verge of adding Stanford, California, and SMU. And apparently, according to further reports, Washington State and Oregon State are meeting tomorrow, I think. Some people are saying with the Mountain West and later this week with the American to explore opportunities. Guys, what do you think about Pac-12 sending two of our founding members to the Atlantic Coast Conference?
Nothing said specific like Atlantic. That's all I'm going to say. So I don't know. In this day and age of football, where geography makes zero sense, and I think Tony, you said that they are working out the numbers on the travel, etc. That's the only thing I saw about it. Academically, it makes great. It makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of great academic schools in the ACC. They would absolutely fit there. I'm glad they're finding a home, and I'm just wondering why the Big 12 was afraid to bring Benny in. Because they know that the Beavers would run that conference. So I feel bad for the Pacific Northwest state schools. I think that they deserve better than they got, but I guess the writing was on the wall. This is what was going to happen.
I think the UC Regents needs to have a meeting where they analyze the travel concerns and the emissions and the budget constraints of moving to a different conference. And then they should have a vote on whether that's appropriate or not. And then at the end of it, they should decide that because UCI and UC Davis are in the mountain, whatever,
the Big West
Federation, the other thing that they're actually in with Cal. There's like a mountain federation, whatever.
Oh, the Mountain Pacific.
Where they play like
MPSF.
water polo and whatnot, right? So I think that it should be Cal's duty to pay the money, the difference between the ACC money that they get and the money that UCI basketball gets and UC Davis football gets to support those programs that they're leaving behind on the West Coast. Now, all joking aside, people that know me know that I want Cal to succeed. The crazy thing to me is the money talk going on behind this. And who knows what's actually happening, right? But the idea that SMU is oh yeah, we'll go for free, and Stanford and Cal are we'll go for pennies on the dollar. If it is really pennies on the dollar, I really do just wish I really do wish that the Big Ten would kind of jump in all of a sudden and be okay, well, if you're doing it for this little amount, we'll take you. Especially when you consider the way Martin Jarman was talking in an interview that David Woods and Tracy of Bruin Report Online did. it seems, and David said this on the podcast, The Champion, so I don't think I'm giving away private info before they come after me. The way that they're taught, like he was talking about scheduling, it seemed like the idea was that UCLA was going to play Washington and Oregon every year, and they're just trying to figure it out. And again, from a competitive standpoint, I do think it's a disadvantage for all the West Coast schools if they do all have to play each other, versus what the rest of the rest of the Big Ten schedules will look like. So for travel and for a little bit more competitive balance at the current state of affairs, and for my own personal enjoyment of football, I would much prefer Cal and Stanford in the Big, but that doesn't seem like something that's on the table right now unless they just come out of nowhere, which is what I was hoping this all was from the beginning, but it doesn't seem that way. And it seems like they are inching ever closer to joining the ACC at this reduced rate. I really hope the Beavs and the Cougs can find a way to find a home as well, because ultimately I think more than anyone else, those two are undeserving of what's happened to them. And again, I want to see those programs live on, because I think, as we've all stated before, this all kind of sucks.
Irony. It's full of irony. That's all I got to say. Because the longer that Stanford and Cal keep on having discussions with the ACC, it tells you everything you need to know. They don't want to be part of the Pac-4. They don't want to rebuild it. They'll take pennies on the dollar just to go, play across the country. And, I do feel sorry for Oregon State and Washington State for about 5 seconds, honestly, because this didn't have to happen. And I think this week pretty much explains it, right? Because the NCAA didn't have to take down USC. It was fraudulent, all right? Now, USC was mentioned with the athletic department, the ADs, the university, all the way up to the president. But you know what? Larry Scott was a Harvard tennis guy, and he didn't know how to promote the Pac-12. The SEC would protect Alabama and Georgia to the hilt, and nobody protected USC. And so you're wondering how we got here. Yeah, you know what? We're arrogant, but you know what? Everybody recognizes that we are the Pac-12. We were the Pac-12. So as the Pac-12 fell apart, it's because after 13 months, you couldn't get a TV deal. So this is sad, but that's what you have when you agree to equal revenue sharing. And yeah, it did take 11 years to pan out, but this didn't happen overnight. It didn't. And now we're seeing the consequences.
Well, and LB said, just building on that, also there are real consequences because Washington State was the Pac-12, the number 2 person in the Pac-12's executive committee this whole past year who did nothing. So I feel bad for Oregon State, but at the same time, I don't feel very bad for Washington State because Washington State kind of is reaping what they sowed, which was a whole lot of nothing, and now they have a whole lot of nothing. Now Washington, who was the chairman of the Pac-12 for the past year, Washington being Washington, they stumbled into exactly what they wanted the whole time. And in Jen Cohen's interviews, as she talked about the last year of applying to the Big Ten, and she talked about how while USC spent the last year planning to go to the Big Ten, Washington spent the last year preparing to try to win the Big Ten over, which is why she's so familiar with the Big Ten. And it, to some of us, it really, I think, stood out as, turns out, they've wanted the Big Ten the whole time. So lots of interesting situations there. All right, boys.
Tony, I'm gonna push back just a little bit on Wazoo's fault on being on the executive committee, and you follow this stuff way closer than I do. But let me just put out an idea and see what sticks. Wazoo had no better outcome than the Pac-12 staying together, right? Or the Pac-9 or whatever it was, right? So granted that they might have made poor decisions or had poor leadership in that role, if they're sitting in the room and the Oregons and Washingtons of the room are back channeling with the Big Ten all of the time and saying what the Pac-12 is bringing to them is not going to be good enough. Washington State doesn't probably have the cachet or the power in that room to tell Oregon and Washington to shut up, because they kind of have to do everything they can to have them stick around.
Well, and Chris, just to build on that, I think you're right. But remember, the other one in the room was Stanford, who now finds themselves all but literally having to like, you know, bribe another conference to take them. So I really think Wazoo and Stanford are to blame. Stanford more than anybody, because Chris, you nailed it right there. Really, really fantastic point that Washington State doesn't have the clout to tell people what to do. Stanford has the clout to tell people what to do, and Stanford also did absolutely nothing for over a year. And sorry, go ahead, Rick.
I was just going to say, getting back to Oregon State and Washington State, I'm sorry. I don't. I love those schools, but hey, you did it to yourselves. You look at the 11 years in the Pac-12 where you had equal revenue sharing. You had a down USC that suffered 30 scholarships. No other program in America is going to sustain that unless you're Alabama or Georgia, but they would never be given that type of penalty. We saw what happened to SMU. So you had a down USC, you had a down UCLA that didn't win a Pac-12 championship in the last 11 years. Okay? Those two programs are gone in terms of winning conference championships in the last 11 years. And you can't rise above, and you let Utah win the last two Pac-12 championships, a Mountain West school. So Oregon State and Washington State, they didn't win a Pac-12 championship. So guess what? They never will. And I know that's negative, but it's reality. Stanford won multiple. Oregon, Washington, and Utah. Those four schools. No Washington State, no Oregon State. It's never going to get better. USC did not win one. We were the most dysfunctional we've ever been. So I'm sorry. Maybe the Pac-12 is not for you, and you'd be better in the Big 12 or the Mountain West. That's reality. Take a look at it from a financial standpoint. That might be the best bet.
I wish the Big 12 had taken them.
Well,
I mean, there's certainly better programs in Colorado.
I was going to say their football play is too good to join that conference compared to the other four that they actually took, except for Utah.
Well, and the other four that they've added. I mean, and the other 8 that were sticking around. Oregon State this year would have run all 15, other than maybe Utah, would have run the other 15 of those schools off the map. All right, so we move on, guys, to a little real football. It is that time. We're in week 0, and we have 2 games this week. First and foremost, the big one. USC, number 6 in the country, hosting San Jose State in the LA Coliseum Saturday night on the Pac-12 network. Woohoo. 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Guys, Trojans and the Spartans. Right before we trade San Jose State for a new group of Spartans, what do we think of this game coming up for week 0?
Well, on Friday, Rick and I are getting together with USCJ and John Walker to do an in-depth on this. So I'll keep it short and brief. If you guys want the detailed version, join us 4 p.m. Pacific on this channel. But this game obviously is going to be a game to see how dominant USC can be, because this isn't a matter if USC is going to win or not. San Jose State is a program that USC should beat handily. The issue is that they do have a veteran quarterback, came over from Hawaii, played well last year, and they don't turn the ball over. So what I'm looking to see is if USC, this new rebuilt defense, plays like a playoff level defense that's going to shut down the Spartans. You know, if they struggle or they have difficulty in the first half, then that will tell us a lot. But I'm going to go into a little more detail about that on Friday. Overall, are we doing scores? What are we doing, you guys?
Give us your pick to win.
Okay, I'm going on a limb here and say that USC wins and covers.
And covers. It's like 30.
Yeah, 30, 30 and a half.
Yeah, so I'm going to give some San Jose State background and then a couple of points that I think are interesting from a USC perspective. But San Jose State's coming off of a 7-5 season. They had like a game canceled against New Mexico State that never got made up. So that 7-5 actually includes a bowl game that they lost. But they had some interesting road results if you are looking into it, where they only lost to Auburn by 8 at Auburn, and they only lost by 7 at Fresno State. Their head coach is very well respected. They went 7-0 in the COVID year. 7-1 in the COVID year, and I think he got some National Coach of the Year recognition type stuff. He has Pac-12 ties in the sense that he was a wide receiver at UCLA, and then has had some coaching time as a wide receiver coach at Oregon State, and as a GA at Washington and Arizona. That being said, then they actually finished like 24th, I think, in the AP and the coaches poll back in that COVID year, or at least reached it at one point in time, which is, I think, phenomenal for a school like San Jose State. But that said, and like you touched on, Tim, their quarterback is pretty good, and he's played fast. Well. Yeah. And he's played well before. That said, they've lost a ton on defense. They used to have what they thought was a pretty good front seven, and a lot of those guys are gone now. So USC is going to do what they want on offense against a lot of teams, but that's going to especially be true in this game. The thing that's interesting to me is, talking about that quarterback, whether or not SC's defense is going to be better than what the public expects. And I judge that as like Vegas's team total for San Jose State is 17.5. So I'm kind of like, I kind of want to put an eye out there and just see what San Jose State does against that number in terms of what people expect for SC's off like defense versus what happens on the field. That being said, like the games should never be in question. I don't know if they cover or not, because I think San Jose State's going to be playing till the very end to get whatever kind of win, whether it's a situational win rather than a game win at any point in the game that it can to build upon as they move forward in their season. Whereas SC might let off the gas toward the end, right? Because whether they win by 40 or 29 shouldn't be important to them as much as staying healthy until week 6 or 7, whenever they play Notre Dame. But yeah, SC rolls.
Serge, great analysis. Good job bringing up the Fresno State tight game last year, 17-10. It was in Fresno, but there was a key missing player that you failed to talk about, and that was Jake Haener was not playing in that game because he was injured. He got injured in the USC game. So that game was a little bit closer because of that very reason.
Yeah, and the point that I left out about Auburn is that Auburn sucked.
Well, and you know who sucked? Who sucked even more 3 years ago? San Jose State went into Fayetteville, and they beat the Razorbacks 31-24. And they were ahead at halftime.
I forgot about that.
Yes. And this is the same coach, Brennan. And yeah, they beat the Razorbacks. And let me tell you, Woo Pig Suey ain't very happy, especially when you lose to a Mountain West team. They don't even know where San Jose State's at. So they went down to Fayetteville. They beat them. They were ahead at Jordan-Hare at Auburn 10-7. They ended up losing that game 24-16, and that was the end of Auburn's head coach last year. And what a disgrace that must have been down there at War Damn Eagle. But anyhow, San Jose State, it's a quality team. Honestly, the first 3 games that USC is going to have, they're scrimmages. They're going to determine who the starters are after the bye week. There's going to be analysis going to be happening, and that just my opinion, but I think Lincoln Riley and the staff says, hey, look, there's so much competition. We don't know who's going to be a starter and who's going to be second team, but you guys can prove it to us in the next 3 weeks. I think that's what's going to happen. And like I mentioned earlier, USC is going to roll in this game 52-16. Tony?
I kind of agree with you guys all. I think USC is going to win this one. I'm not as sure on the score because my hope for this game is that we use it as a time to get a lot of people playing a lot of playing time. I would love nothing more than for Caleb Williams. I think Rick or Tim, one of you guys said it earlier in the week on something else, I think. Would love nothing more than for Caleb Williams to have no idea where his helmet is in the second half. As Miller and Malachi get to play. Like that. I really think that it's important that we get lots of team guys having lots of reps, avoid injuries, kind of almost have this really be the scrimmage. And so if we win by 30, if we win by 25, if we win by 70, I really don't care. I just want to make sure that our defense is looking good. Our team has time to start clicking, and we use this first game because the season gets tough for us. So I don't want us to, I'd like us to have as much dry powder as possible after this game, but I think USC rolls.
And one last thing, this is a perfect example of the Pac-12 and Larry Scott. There's 7 week 0 games, okay? Notre Dame and Navy, which we'll talk about next, going to be on NBC. ESPN primetime, 4 o'clock Pacific, 7 o'clock Eastern, is UMass versus New Mexico State. This game, USC versus San Jose State, number 6 USC, with returning Heisman Caleb Williams, 5 o'clock Pacific, 8 o'clock Eastern on the Pac-12 network. That's all that you need to know. So why are Oregon State and Washington State, why are teams feeling sorry for them? Well, guess what? This is why. You voted for equal revenue sharing and the Pac-12 network and Larry Scott's pie in the sky. And this is a perfect example of what happened. Okay. This is not Oregon State playing. This is not Washington State with a Heisman Trophy winner. This is frickin' USC. All right. And it's a joke. And I'm disgusted. And that's the truth.
And just so that for everybody in the chat, just so you guys, for anybody who doesn't know how the Pac-12 minimums work, under this media deal with the Pac-12 networks, every team in the Pac-12 has to play a minimum number of games on the Pac-12 network. And that number is however many out-of-conference home games you have is the minimum number of games you have to play on the Pac-12 network. So for USC last year, that number was 3. For USC this year, that number is 2. And I believe, guys, aren't our first 2 games on the Pac-12 network?
Yes, thank God.
So
yeah,
so that
please get them out of the way
that.
now. Please get them out of the way now so that a game like, as good as Oregon State USC last year isn't on the Pac-12 network, and some later game of yours that will actually matter is on TV that people that aren't me that have 12 Pac-12 channels in New York can actually watch.
I like it. Is that everybody done this game?
Move on.
Oh, Tim, you're muted.
I just say the Pete Arbogast, the radio guy for USC, whenever is a perfect day, which is when the Trojans win and the Bruins and the Irish lose, he calls it a perfect day. They all go celebrate at the statue. Well, I wanted to do something similar to that because after the Nevada game, it'll be the last time that we ever, as Trojans, have to deal with the Pac-12 network. And so I was going to celebrate to see if Rick wanted to come with me, and we're going to head over to the statue afterwards. If anybody out there wants to join us, and we're going to tip one back. Hey, I would say we do some ciders like that, but now that like some non-alcoholic. But now that we have the Fight On Ale, I'm going to try to steal one from Rick, and then Rick and I will toast a Fight On Ale, maybe on the air, Tony, and we'll celebrate
the end of the Pac-12 network. Tim, we should totally do that. To the end of the Pac-12 network.
And any Trojans listening, come join us because it's going to be fun. Ding dong. The conference is dead. Well, at least the network's dead. Let's go.
The network's dead. He's dead to us anyway.
That is a great idea, Tim. I think we should do our USC postgame from the Peristyle with the fans and fight on pale ale. Let's do it. I'm down.
I like it. We'll do it. All right. Everybody got that game right?
Yep.
All right. Our next game, as you guys know, we do here on the Pac-12 Chat Show Live cover the Pac-12's best friend and partner in crime, enemy rival, Notre Dame as well. So another week 0 game, guys. Notre Dame is going to Aviva Stadium in Ireland, which, by the way, is actually a cool, like, it's an awesome soccer stadium. Really modern, really cool, like really nice facility. And Notre Dame with Hartman at quarterback is taking on the Navy midshipmen. Boys, what do we think about Notre Dame and Navy?
I'll go ahead and start it off, and then you guys can add more. Navy is bringing in a new head coach, right? Ken Newberry-Montololo is, now an analyst at UCLA. So they're bringing in Brian Newberry, who was their former defensive coordinator, but he has never been a head coach before. I'll get to why that was an interesting choice for them in a couple of minutes. Their new offensive coordinator is a guy named Grant Chestnut from Kennesaw State, who ran a spread option. I think they expect to throw the ball a little bit more, but how much more is a question. I'm not really sure. But back to the point of who they chose, bringing the defensive coordinator up as their head coach, is that Navy's defense was not good last year. So I pretty much expect Notre Dame in this game to they're like a 20-point favorite, and although they had some season opener struggles last year, losing to Ohio State and then to Marshall and then kind of barely escaping Cal, I think this is going to be a little bit different. I think that they're going to take care of business. But what's going to be interesting to me, and what I think that they're going to be kind of focused on, is, they paid a lot of money to bring Hartman in. And I think they got to figure out who he's going to throw the ball to, because that guy likes to chuck it downfield. And I think there's some questions for Notre Dame that need answering with respect to who they think is going to step up at the wide receiver and tight end positions for them, because they're going to want to throw the ball. They didn't bring Sam Hartman on to, run the ball 70% of the time or 60% of the time. They're going to want to throw the ball. And I think a lot of this game for them is in part, making sure that they're in a comfortable position, but also taking good reps against a decent team and finding out who's who and who they can rely on later in the year to throw the ball to.
Well, and that, I'm glad you're talking about the throwing, because the issue that I'm worried about for Notre Dame is as we know, Jared Parker is going to be their new offensive coordinator. It's a guy that they brought up, who was a tight end coach last year. Will's tried to downplay that to me, but I think it's huge. You got a great. It's a shame is you got a great quarterback in Sam Hartman coming in. As far as throwing, they do have that big tall receiver Merriweather. Tobias Merriweather. He's legit, but as we know, if you have an offense where you have one legit playmaker, it could very easily you can negate that by doubling, etc. They did move their running back Chris Tyree to like a flank, kind of like a slot receiver, which that guy is electric. You get the ball in his hands, especially in space. He definitely can do something with it. And then as far as the tight end, they're breaking in a new tight end, but I don't even know his name. But Evans. He's a blue chipper, and then they're Notre Dame. You have a history of having great tight ends. You're always going to roll the next one out. How good he'll be, we don't know. But he's a big dude. He's a blue chipper. I think he was like the number 4 tight end in the country when he came out. And then the last part of it is they do have Estime. This guy's huge. Although the midshipmen had a top 10 rushing defense, I wonder how much of that was the fact that maybe teams were throwing the ball all over on them. I don't know. Chris, maybe you do know more about that. But they had a fairly stout, statistically, rush defense. But Audric Estime is a big load, big dude. He could do some damage running behind one of the best left tackles in football in Joe Alt. All that said, I think Notre Dame covers. my God, if they lose, can you imagine the jokes? So I just hope for their sake that they actually they don't drop the game in Ireland. That would be tragic.
Yeah,
Tim, those jokes would be awesome. That's what they would be.
Awesome, but not for Will. My heart would go out to Will.
Navy's coach Ken Uwatalolo, he was fired last year in the locker room by the Navy AD. This is a guy who went 11-2 in 2019 at the academy. So now I believe he's working with Chip Kelly in UCLA. Serge, is that correct? He's still there. He's a defensive analyst.
Yeah, he's an offensive analyst. Yeah. Or his technical role is like leadership or something, but he's like sitting in every meeting. He's like with that. I'm sure that he has a thing or two to say about certain things that involve football more than just leadership, but his technical role is some kind of like leadership advisory thing.
Okay. Yeah. So the strength of Navy last year was the defense, not the offense. And with Newberry moving up to head coaching gig, PJ Volker is handling the linebackers. He was handling linebackers. Now he's going to be taking over the DC role. The midshipmen were the best in the AAC in third down stops last year, second in sacks, and second in the nation at stopping the run. But most of the problems for last year's 4-8 team were on the offensive side of the ball. Colin Ramos is an active tackler at one linebacker spot, and the options are there to play around with the rotation. The pressure of the backfield comes from everywhere, led by Jacob Busick. He's an edge rusher who will be the focus of everyone's blocking scheme from Notre Dame. And Donald Bernier is a 250-pound veteran tackle who does an amazing job of holding up. The secondary is loaded with veterans. Wyun Lane is a volume tackler from his free safety spot. Williams is the best ball corner of the bunch. There's a ton of quickness across the board. The DBs will be a strength. This is going to be the focus on stopping Sam Hartman. And Notre Dame is going to have their way, but they got to be patient. They got to establish their offensive scheme, which is going to be new and different for them. They're going to be playing on the road in Dublin with a new offensive coordinator, a new quarterback. So patience is going to be key. Second half, Notre Dame will take over and close out the game and win going away.
And Tim, to quickly answer your question, if you look at like EPA for the Navy defense, which is expected points added, if you look at that for their defense last year, their rush defense was like 21st in that, but the passing defense was 131st.
Yeah.
So
I think it was a hitch.
There's the reason why people aren't necessarily running on them might have less to do with the fact that people can't run on them and more to do with the fact that people could throw anywhere they wanted.
That's what I figured.
Tony, what's your take?
Am I up? Am I the last one?
Yeah.
I want to hope for. Well, so I'm a little torn. I want to hope for Navy because, as everyone in our family says, our favorite team is our alma mater and whoever's playing Notre Dame. But I don't think Navy's got the horses for it. I mean, I love Navy and I have so many friends who went to the academy. I love going to Navy games, but I don't think they're going to be able to hang with Notre Dame, especially given this is their first game with the new coach. I really think Hartman's going to be better than anybody they had last year. I mean, it'll be a wonderful miracle. I don't see it happening. I think Notre Dame rolls. So, friend of the show, will be very happy, and we'll have to have him on Saturday to help us break down what happened and what went on. But yeah, I wish they could. I just don't think they're going to pull it off.
Well, I think we said that about Marshall and Stanford last year too. So
we did.
It could be a bumpy ride with the Irish sometimes.
Hey, you know what? I'll find. I won't find some dress whites, but I was gonna say I'll wear all white on Saturday in honor of Navy if they can pull off the win. But it is a cool game, and the people in Ireland have been really supportive of Notre Dame. They've really kind of done despite the fact that it's not actually originally an Irish Catholic school. It's like I think it's French Catholic.
It's French.
But Yeah, but I give credit to how they've kind of pulled the marketing end of it. I think it's kind of neat that they do that. And, it's awesome with Navy. I mean, they get all the the sailors that are all, there from, is it the Sixth Fleet? The Sixth Fleet, which is in Naples? I think so. They fly up there to see the game. And I mean, they really kind of do it upright. And I hope it's a good game and a fun game. And better than the Nebraska Northwestern game that was so bad last year. Although, who knew? We saw that one game. We didn't realize we were watching two of the worst teams in the country. So we'll see what happens there.
Tony, what do you think the people of Dublin think of the Irish mascot? Do they embrace him? Do they?
They do, from what I'm told.
Do they ridicule him? What do you think?
No, from what I'm told, they really like it. Like they kind of view it as like a compliment. Like this is somebody who's celebrating us.
Okay.
I'm going to put the link in the chat, guys. We'd love to hear what you think about the Pac-12 games coming up this week. And what you think about what's going on. I just got the link right now. Just went in the chat. And if you're watching on the screen, you can just use the QR code. It should call you in directly. I think they do a neat job. I'll tell you who does a really great job with that is Florida State. The role that the Seminole tribe plays in helping, helping their, Chief Osceola, helping they do the costume. They train the guy who does it, and then they bring him to events that the Seminole tribe is hosting. They bring the band, they bring the mascot. So they really do a neat job like connecting the mascot to the people. And I think that's pretty cool. And it is a very high point of pride for the Seminole tribe. So that's I give Florida State a lot of credit for that. But we would love to hear from you guys, hear what you think of the Pac-12 games this week. So guys, other than USC and Navy, what other week 0 games are we looking forward to?
Honestly,
Bandy Hawaii, baby, anchor down. Let's get one team that's playing like I think in a high school in Hawaii because their stadium has issues, right? Versus a team in Vanderbilt that is in mid-construction with an open end zone with cranes on it. This is one of the best chances for the Doors to win a game all year, and I'm a semi-closet Door fan, so I would love to, I think they're favored by like 17 or something. So I will definitely be checking in on the Commodores. And I'm a little interested because I think they've had some upward progression building that where I'd like to see that maintained. Tough sledding ahead of them when they get to the conference, obviously, but Hawaii is one that they should win.
I'm looking at the I'm going to call it the Pac-12 psych game. San Diego State, who was so close to being a Pac-12 member and replacing the Trojans and Bruins as the Southern California representative of the great Pac-12, or 10 or 9 or whatever it was going to be. They were that close. They're hosting Ohio, and they're actually hosting them at their new stadium down there in San Diego. I think it's called Snapdragon Stadium. It's at 4 o'clock Pacific on FS1. So guess what? They're going to have higher ratings like they were a Pac-12 team because they're on FS1 while the USC Trojans are up the freeway on the Pac-12 network. So, I'm excited about that game. Tim?
Yeah, it's slim pickings. It is football, but that's the game I was looking at as well, is the Ohio game versus San Diego State. I mean, I've had a lot of friends who went to San Diego State. I don't know much about the team this year, but I've always been kind of a second team to root for. And I was kind of bummed out because again, all those guys were stoked. They were finally going to make it to the Pac-12, and the Pac-12 does a Pac-12 and folds. So it'll be interesting to see if their morale, and that's a lot of money for that stadium. I'm wondering, and what makes me wonder is like all these stadiums, like the new Research Stadium or all that money that Boise put into their stadium, and these stadiums that people are building, and as college football is consolidating, and what we used to know of as the BCS, the FBS schools, it's just going to seem like their position, especially on TV, is going to be relegated more and more. And I just wonder what's going to happen to all this money they put into these programs.
A little bit more on that. I'll come back to that, but I had a point on Ohio SJSU that I wanted to make real quick. That game is probably one of the best games all day. I think it's only like a 2-point spread. Ohio has a quarterback named Curtis Rourke who was 25 TDs to 4 interceptions last year and threw for about 3,000 yards. The kid can play. That's actually a really good game. And if you don't typically watch a team like that or games like that, you might want to check him out. I'm going to check it out as a UCLA fan because we play San Diego State this year just to kind of get an idea of what they're about. But that is the best game of the day. I said Vandy because I have a little bit of homer bias there, but you guys are spot on. That's probably the best game all day, and I think it's a really interesting game. To your point about the stadiums, yeah, it's a great question because we see the issues that a stadium financing can cause with Cal and the trouble that that's brought with the UC Regents and whether that dips into UCLA's budget to help finance that, among other things. So, yeah, the question for San Diego State and Oregon State, where they made all of these big improvements to their facilities in an attempt to try to step up and stay on that level or get to that new level for San Diego State. And it hasn't worked out for them thus far. It's certainly an issue.
Sorry, one thing about San Diego State that's a little bit different than some of these other places is that San Diego State, and I think this is actually like a smart, interesting thing that colleges often don't do. When the Chargers left town, San Diego State took the responsibility to build like the stadium of San Diego. So the MLS team plays there now. They have, there's huge concerts there all the time. Like that really, San Diego is a major American city, and Snapdragon Stadium is, well, they have the baseball stadium, but other than the baseball stadium, Snapdragon Stadium is the stadium of San Diego. Whereas you look at some of these other places, like, USF is spending a fortune that they don't necessarily really even have to build their new stadium. And there's already an NFL stadium just down the road that's, will always be nicer than theirs. So San Diego State has made the business case a little bit better on that, which I think helps. We had a question here, guys, from Gixxer Squid, good friend of the show. Gixxer, thank you as always for your support and being a friend of the show. We love to have you. But an interesting question: which Pac-12 Week 1 matchup is most likely to be an upset or a surprise? You guys want me to put up the schedules real quick?
Yeah.
Just as a reminder, I think we got them in here. So Arizona plays Northern Arizona. Utah plays Southern Utah. Cal plays North Texas. Colorado plays TCU. Oregon plays Portland State. Oregon State plays San Jose State, which we're going to see how they do against us. Stanford plays at Hawaii. The battle of who could have fewer fans at a game. UCLA plays Coastal Carolina. USC plays Nevada. Utah plays Florida, and I understand College Game Day is going to be there. Washington plays Boise State. And Washington State plays Colorado State.
I think the three likeliest upsets, unless you guys want to throw another one in the mix, are Cal going to the University of Northern Texas, who's I'm not saying they're a great team, but they're a better team than people think. Cal should still be favored by double digits, but we'll see what happens. Or UCLA versus Coastal Carolina, or that Utah-Florida game. The line on that, like betting wise, just moved from like 9.5 to 4.5. Because of the news that Cam Rising probably isn't going to be playing in it. I think those are the 3 games that I would look at as like an upset scenario.
Well, even with that line, I don't think anyone's looking at the Utah-Florida game. You know what I mean? I get you that with Cam Rising, it would be an upset, but without him, I'm not thinking it's going to be much of an upset if Florida would win that game. You know? But by definition, that one's good. You really think that they could lose to Coastal, the Bruins?
No, I don't think that they probably won't. I think we like the math probably gives us like an 87% chance to win or something, but I could see Chip messing around in his normal non-conference kind of thing. People laugh about that South Alabama game that we had last year, even though that happened to be one of the best defenses we played all year. Coastal has a new exactly. Coastal has a new coach, but they also still have Grayson McCall. And our weakness is our secondary. And if Garbers starts and throws a couple picks early, or bad things happen and you play poorly, you can still lose. There's things there. I think that's our hardest out of conference game. Personally, I think the numbers might say that San Diego State is supposed to be harder, but I think if we trip up 1 week during the preseason and do some classic Chip Kelly stuff from a couple of years ago, I think that's the game. I don't think it will happen, but I think it's one of them on that list. If you're trying to pick one, that's some reasons for it.
Well, so are we slowing the roll on the prime train? Because earlier you guys were really big on Coach Prime, but they're gonna get their asses kicked in that one for sure.
Has anyone
I'm
on
the
this?
prime train, but I think I think the prime train is gonna find itself
derail.
He's gonna find itself derailed. You said it before I could.
I was gonna say, has anyone on this show thought that Colorado was gonna win more than like 3 or 4 games?
No,
I don't know that I see 3, but
TCU will not be one of them.
No,
correct.
No, I think TCU is going to roll them.
I think the Gixxer, thanks a lot for the super chat and for the question. I think a surprise, and it would be an upset, is Utah's got to watch out for Florida. Now, Florida's lost Anthony Richardson to the NFL. And with that line moving, that tells me that Vegas doesn't believe that Cam Rising is going to be available. I've been telling you, I've questioned that since June. Tim, you know that. I know a lot of athletes that have had ACL surgeries, and I'm sorry, you just can't if you can't practice, you can't play in a high-pressure game against the SEC. And if you're Kyle Whittingham, why would you even want to put him in there when you're looking to win the Pac-12 championship and defend, right?
That's it right there, Rick. That's it right there.
Yeah. So, but Utah, they're a great program. It's at home. It's college game day. They'll tell you, they got it in their Twitter handles. They got bracketing roses. They'll let you know that we beat USC, and they did twice. Congratulations. You did. Everybody saw you lose down in Florida. Now you're at the muss. You got the muss behind you. Let's see what you can do, because you got Nate Johnson, and we've been told Bryson Barnes beat who was it? Washington State last year. He did play in the Rose Bowl 2 years ago. You got Jaquindon Jackson. You've got Keithy. You've got a great offensive line, a great defensive line, and you've got altitude. So hey, I don't want excuses. You should win this game. What was Florida last year? 6-7. They got boat raced in Vegas because they didn't want to play, supposedly. But hey, this is an SEC team, and I don't care who's quarterbacking. Utah should win this game. And they got a coach that's been there for 18 years, and he's ready to become a congressman at Utah once he retires. He's that popular.
I think if the game was played tomorrow, the starting quarterback would be like their third string guy. So
yeah. Well, second string is out for the rest of the season. Yeah.
Right.
Although based on, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, based on current coaches to Congress LBC, Kyle Whittingham might be too successful. He might not be electable. I think you have to be a mediocre coach at Cincinnati to get elected to Congress these days.
Oh. We're just gonna overlook Auburn, huh?
Exactly.
He was somewhat successful there.
Marginally.
I want to see that. So what's really good at sea level is not good at altitude. And I don't think a lot of these people, they used to give SC a lot of crap for going into Rice-Eccles and playing at that altitude. 320-pound linemen are not meant to play at that kind of an altitude. And I'm interested to see how those gigantic lines, those gigantic SEC lines from Florida will hold up through 4 quarters up at Rice-Eccles. Like you said, Rick, with a Muss screaming at them, loud place, man, in the 4th quarter. And when you're a bit gassed and the oxygen is a bit low and you're a gigantic man, like these guys are going to be, a lot can happen. And they do have that going for them. So it will be interesting to see. You know, USC was up to a good lead, but then in the 4th quarter, they just ran out of gas. They really did. And I'm be interested to see how well Florida holds up to that as well.
That's going to be a great game. It's Thursday night. It's going to be the only game on. All eyes are on Utah and Florida. This is SEC versus the Purgatory Pac-12 representative, who will be, whether you want to believe it's heaven or hell where they're going to go, but they're going to the Big 12. So I'll let you people decide the Purgatory Pac-12 where they're going. I know SC and UCLA are going to heaven. Utah, hey, I'm Catholic, you're Mormon. I'll let you decide.
By the way, I just put the link in the chat. Last call for anybody who wants to call in and tell us what you guys think.
By the way, Rick, I don't think the Mormons have purgatory, but we could double check that.
Hey, man.
Moving on to what do you guys do you think Cal might go down to North Texas? North Texas is better than people think.
Yeah, it's possible. Yeah, definite possibility.
And
Serge?
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I mean, I already brought it up as one of the 3 that I would say are like the ones that I would like spot check or whatever, which means probably none of them are, and it's something else I'm not considering. But those are
in typical Pac-12 style.
Right, but that's one of the 3 that I think is a distinct possibility for sure.
But we can always
here's another.
Cal should win that game, but obviously that's why it's an upset.
We could always say that Cal was overlooking North Texas to get to Auburn. That's what we could say.
And speaking of a dark horse upset, guys, that nobody brought up, does Boise State have a chance to stun the world in Seattle?
No. Absolutely. No.
I'm not even as high on Washington as some people, but no. This isn't like the Boise team that beat Oklahoma in the Fiesta Bowl with all kinds of razzle dazzle and magic and actually good players. This Boise team is not that Boise team, and this Washington team is pretty good. So no.
What about the Montana team that went and beat Washington? It's happened.
There's just too much talent this year, right? For that kind of an upset.
And sorry, Huskies, we're just teasing. Dubs up. All right. Well, guys, I think you guys are quiet tonight. The chat is firing away. There's all sorts of good debates in the chat, but you guys are quiet tonight. So on that note, let's take a look as we wrap up here. Guys, we've got week 0 coming off. Let's give any final thoughts.
I'm just glad it's here, right? There's been this off season, there's been so much drama back and forth about realignment. I'm just glad to get an opportunity to start seeing football. We talked about the week 0 games. That's the beauty of week 0. It doesn't matter, right? If you're a team that's not considered to be a contender for the play. It's only a week of the year where not being contender for the playoffs it matters, right? Everyone's gonna watch all these games, so I can't wait. I'm definitely on Thursday. I can't wait to watch that Florida and Utah game. I think it's gonna be awesome. And I think that Mark is doing his marathon. Do you have more information on that, Tony?
I don't yet.
Okay.
You?
But I'm excited for the official kickoff of football. I can't wait. This is like a week away.
Yeah, no, same here. I'm excited it's finally here. I am so burnt out talking about realignment and other things that I don't enjoy from like a outcome perspective of where I think things are going. So I'm excited that games on the field are actually happening. I know that SC people might be upset that the Pac-12 game is or the San Jose State game is on the Pac-12 network, but then it does give it does allow some eyeballs to see games like Ohio versus San Diego State, which as you like should be a great game. And I'm not here to like champion for the G5 or to talk about poorly about the Pac or whatever, but I do think that games like that and teams like that are worth watching. And you might enjoy it more than you think you would. The only other thing is I'm trying to decide if my new shtick should be that I just don't talk about USC until week 7 when they play someone that they're not favored by 20 to 30 points over. So I'll decide in the coming weeks if my USC recap is just no comment until the middle of October. And that you guys pontificate about how great they look. Anyway, again, I'm excited. Go Bruins. Look forward to the season finally starting.
I'm excited because this is the 100th year anniversary of the LA Memorial Coliseum. And it's going to be a special year because this is the last year of the Pac-12. And it's going to be a great conference race. I think some analysts have it as being the number 2 conference behind the SEC. I think that's a lot of it has to do with the quality of quarterbacks that are returning. Arguably, there are like 7 quarterbacks that are just, on any given day can sling that rock. So it's going to be exciting in what I like to call the Pac-12 Purgatory Conference of Champions, because this is it. This is the last year. Like I said, some teams are going to take their championships and go to heaven, and some are going to take no championships and go to hell. And you know what? You know who I'm talking about. Those teams can go to hell.
I like it, Rick. I agree.
I'm looking at you, Sparky. I'm looking at you, Michael Crow, because you are a devil. You are a devil, and you are Sparky. And you got no champion. You got no national championships.
Rick, hell means you died. They're going to the zombie conference. And so I think that's like The Walking Dead. It's almost a fate worse than death because they're going to walk around. And I mean, it looks like with this move going to the ACC, with Stanford and Cal, it looks like the Pac-12 is going to be given an honorable death, whoosh, nice and clean and over. Whereas you have a life form just living on, a shell of itself that's going to continue on in perpetuity. I'd rather the Pac-12, a majestic, beautiful conference conference of champions that we were, just gets an honorable death and then moves on and is not stuck going through season after season with zombie shell of itself that it used to be.
Now, I'm not lying on that either, because ASU, Arizona, and Utah never won a national championship in football. Am I right?
Am
I right?
That's correct.
Now, Colorado won one, but they were in the Big 12 at the time.
And they got 5 downs. Yeah,
and they won one, but they never won one in the Pac-12. So they're going back. They're taking what they had. They didn't win anything here. They finished basically in last place for the last 11 years total. Now, UCLA's taking a half an NC to the Big 10. USC's taken 11. And Washington's taken half events of a national championship, also the Big 10. Oregon, you're going because of Phil Knight, because you got nothing, but you got Phil Knight. So, and Washington took you by the scruff of the neck and took them with you, because if you said no, they would have taken Stanford. And Stanford won a few national championships under Pop Warner. So you should be fortunate, you discount Ducks, to steal your term there, Tim. But there you go. It's going to be a fun year in the Pac-12.
It is. And my urging for fans, and this isn't just for Pac-12 fans, it's for everybody. Watch the Pac-12 games this year because it is going to be the last year that we have a lot of these games that have been like fun, sometimes bitter rivalry, over a century. And this is going to be the last year for some of them. So watch them and enjoy them. Enjoy what they are. And I mean, don't be sad because they're going to go away, because there's going to be new things. There's going to be new games. There's going to be new teams. We're going to see Oregon and Wisconsin. I mean, it's going to be cool. But enjoy those last games while we have them. Enjoy the idea of Washington. I mean, Washington is going to go down to the desert. Washington hasn't won in the desert since 2001. So, enjoy the wildness, the zaniness. There will be certainly zaniness. There'll be terrible officiating. There'll be crazy upsets, and it's fun. So enjoy it, live it up. Games start this weekend, boys. Game on and fight on. We'll see you next week.